There's nothing better on a hot summer day to hang out with Barb from Healthy, Well, and Wise. We're both surviving the heat, and it's we're recording the August show in July here, obviously, but it's the conversation up here we just had was amazing, and we're going to get into your story this month in the Hub, and I really enjoyed reading it, and it caused me to think in a lot of different areas that I hadn't really thought about. So I do appreciate that. The title this month is Acute, Episodic, or Chronic. And boy, I looked at it. You looked at it both from the physical side, and there's that mental side too. Like there's so many things that we battle on a daily basis, and you sort of put those together in a nutshell for everybody to understand. And you don't. One of the points that you brought up, and I'm sorry to delay you, but I really want to get this out, was just the confusion, right? Like not knowing where you're at with your pain or what that pain is. So I'm gonna throw it over to you in this hot sunny day, and go nuts, Barb.
It is definitely hot. Yeah, so acute, episodic, or chronic, it applies to all facets of our bodies, and whether it's mental, whether it's physical. The word acute, it is what brings all of our defenses immediately to the surface in the body. If it's a physical injury, then your immune system and your red blood cells and inflammatory compounds and all of these amazing and wondrous things happen. But when it comes to our mental and emotional health, those same tools, if it's not a true emergency, but it's actually something that has come up in our lives either time and time again, which is episodic, or if it's truly chronic, where it's just rinse, lather, repeat in every area of your life. And so we often find ourselves just so incredibly stuck and not understanding because we're not reflecting on our responses, but we're just always, I think the big word right now is that people are either triggered or traumatized. And it's everybody has trauma, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has had some form of experience that they interpret as traumatic. So that's not the fact that everybody's had that just means that, well, what was the response? What was the support to that person when that happened? Were they old enough to understand it? Were they able to express themselves? Were other people comforting, even though they couldn't change what happened to that individual? And so, if those elements aren't met, that person can truly, for the rest of their life, whether it's one incident or whether it's a complex trauma situation where one thing after another has been experienced in that person, that that level of expectation of others to support you isn't necessarily there. So you're always reacting as if something's an emergency. And it's all stress response, whether we physically injure ourselves or whether it's something that frightens us and it's more emotional, those sorts of things, it's still a stressor. And when we understand how that actually is impacting our body, with inflammation, with the way that our relationships are day to day, because sometimes we just don't understand that all we have to do is invite ourselves to understand what those feelings have actually come up over and give ourselves a chance to breathe and explore them. And that can change the way we go forward. But a lot of us get really, really stuck in those patterns.
I think too, um, one of the right there at that topic that what you just said, what I want to counter that with is the aspect of social media,
Mhm.
because you just said it, you get caught in this cycle. And if you're looking at this and you're not doing those other things to clear your own mind, then that will probably help lead to more chronic problems down the road. Maybe your neck from
Mhm.
looking at your phone, maybe it be the mental health aspect of it. So that
Right.
there's that. I mean, there's a tipping point there, right? Like
Mhm.
like when you said when you go acute, episodic, or chronic, each one has a little tipping point where it drops into the next bucket, and it spills over eventually. So how do we, boy, I mean, both physical and mentally, when you're healing something, when you're healing from a physical injury, and maybe
Mhm.
it turns into long-term arthritis, right? A chronic problem
Right.
down the road.
Right.
Um,
Mhm.
both aspects of that, of not addressing it at the immediate point of impact. So if it's a
Mhm.
broken finger, they can heal it. There's no
Mhm.
guarantee. The sooner you heal it, the better it is. Less likely it is to get, you know, to be affected long term by it. But how do we do that? How do we make people aware of that situation in the moment so that it doesn't become chronic? Because I think a lot of people just go, it'll be okay.
And, for many people, for many, many years, many decades, they might be okay.
Right,
But
exactly.
we
Yeah.
we
But
reach that fulcrum. We reach a tipping point where the body and the brain say no. And it's that unrelenting stress, that lack of addressing things. And people don't understand. You can have been perhaps in a car accident,
yeah,
and maybe it was a fairly bad car accident, but you walk out of it with your family and you're like, you're just so grateful. Thank goodness everybody's okay. There might be whiplash, there might have been a concussion, there might have been other injuries that take you to, a medical facility where you're treated as an acute patient, but the team rushes to your aid and they fix up your wounds and, you know,
right.
but you may never ever, for instance, if you were T-boned in an intersection, you may never approach an intersection again the same way, especially if you didn't see that accident coming,
Yeah,
right? And the person that does see it coming is going to have a totally different response. They're going to be hyper vigilant as opposed to just feel like they've been blindsided. And so there will be a different response. And depending on what support that individual recognizes that they need, then things can get pushed down. And then they wonder, why is my neck stiff on that side? And it can be an emotional response. It doesn't mean that it's all in the individual's head in the sense that, oh, they can think their way out of it. Can't think our way out of it if we don't have people that help us understand what those patterns are in our system. And
the,
so you
yeah,
might be fine for years, but when we talk about episodic, it's like, okay, I hadn't thought about that for years and years, but then suddenly it's here. It's all I can think about. I feel like I'm right back in the moment. And that happens to us even in everyday relationships. It might be a word, a sight, a sound, a smell, and suddenly you're right back. So it is chronic, but it's been brought up acute because it's almost like a post traumatic stress response that's held in the body because those emotions and that support weren't addressed at the original trauma to the person.
right. So the
So,
anxiety, so the acute is the physical healing of that broken bone or that whiplash. Um, the episodic could be when you come to that intersection, it could be the anxiety that creates the stress that causes more physical harm. And then if you do
right.
it, and if it keeps affecting you long enough, it blends into the chronic. So it becomes every time you're coming to an intersection anywhere,
Yeah.
that memory, I don't say the memory, but the self-induced anxiety takes over. And then you brought up a good point off air, and then you're stuck. You're literally
Mm,
stuck in that cycle and you can't figure a way out.
right.
So both
Because you've
mental,
so,
physical, wow, emotional,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, because
Wow.
we've so adapted
Right.
ourselves to expect that this is the way that we need to respond every time something reminding us of that situation comes up. And sometimes those thoughts aren't actually helpful thoughts to us, not to our brains, not to our bodies, not to the way that we try to function in the world. And we see so many people that are masking
Yeah.
when they're out in public, but underneath they're experiencing so much pain, so much trauma, so much grief or what have you, but they keep, the persona that everybody else sees everybody else sees a strong, capable person, and yet inside there's this whole imposter thing because they're quaking inside, they're struggling, they're suffering. And that's when we start to see, more negative coping habits like perhaps alcoholism or drug use. And so, when we start to look at ourselves, invite that compassion not just for ourselves but also for when other people's behavior confuses us, if we can shine a bit of light for them and give them some space, and at least be curious about why that person has become
Right.
the way that they have, we might not continue to react so negatively to them all the time.
And it almost like that intersection again, it's a great analogy that we're using, but it's almost like their body goes to fight, flight, or freeze all at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, because
Yep.
they can't make that decision. They're like, well, I
Mhm.
guess they are freezing because they can't make that decision, but they want to fight it. They're trying to get away from it, and then
Mhm.
they're free. Like, yeah, I can't even imagine. Like, yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy. And like you said, then people, how? All right, let's go to the next one. Uh, how do we get them open to be shifting? How do we make them sort of feel? In your article, you talk a little bit about that. So, what's the shift? How do we open that Pandora's box to get them to look at other things and see life in a different light?
Oh, boy. We just opened another Pandora's box
We did,
there.
didn't we? Well, we know
For
we're sort of breaking down those problems, but we're not. And now the
right.
nice part is you talk about the better than, right? So let's talk about that for a second.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, absolutely, the problem within the problem is oftentimes that some sort of health crisis comes up for the individual themselves, or maybe for a loved one. And then their decisions and their options might seem for a time very, very limited. But then you have to start relying on other people, bringing in other people, and those people have skills that kind of help everybody. And some people embrace that help, and other people may still be stuck in that they still don't see a way out for themselves. Uh, it can happen very often with a cancer patient, anybody with any sort of an autoimmune condition. Autoimmune, literally, it's self-attacking self, and it's a degree of suppression that has become so damaging because the person can't see themselves in a healing light, and they don't even recognize it. That you know it's getting better regardless of what it is. Whether you're trying to get better as an athlete, there has to be extra work. You have to go above and beyond what you've already been doing to reach a next level. And that's the same if you're trying to overcome any sort, whether it's your sleep cycle that's disrupted, whether you just want to make sure you're staying better hydrated, whether it's there has to be a desire, there has to be an invitation to yourself to be willing to explore, even if something seems really messy. And it's hard, like it's always hard to make a change when those patterns within ourselves, those adaptations have just settled in. But there's always the stress component, right? There's always the way we view ourselves, the way we view other people. But there has to be that curiosity and that willingness to open ourselves to difficult things, and trust ourselves differently. That's huge.
Check out Barb's video at Hub Media on YouTube, and if you want to read the article, just slide over to our website, hubmedia.info. You can check out all the magazines, and you can see Barb's stories and read on what she's been up to and how she can help you. Barb, thanks for doing this. Look forward to chatting with you next month. Take care.